This joint meeting of the Interagency Consultation Group and the Technical Committee. This is a hybrid meeting, so we have folks online and we are recording the meeting. If anyone has difficulties, please send a message to the chat. So the first we're going to start. Rebecca is going to call the roll call, please.
City of Annapolis, Anne Arundel County,
Here.
Baltimore City, Baltimore County,
Here.
Carroll County, here, Hartford County, Howard County,
Here.
Queen Anne's County,
Here.
MDOT,
Present.
MDE,
Yeah.
MDE, MDOT MTA,
Here.
SHA.
Here.
Thank you.
Can you do that 3 ICG members, please?
And ICG, MDOT,
Here.
MDE,
Yeah.
and BRTB.
Here.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to move on to approval of the minutes. For the technical committee, can I get a motion and a second, please, to approve the minutes?
Motion. Are we any seconds?
Okay, then by a voice vote, all those in support, are there any edits? Does anybody have any suggested edits for the technical committee minutes? Okay, so by voice vote, all those in favor of the technical committee minutes, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Thank you. Anna?
Okay, the next item is the approval of the minutes from the May 15th ICG meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review? Great. Can I please have a motion and a second from ICG members to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Okay, thank you. We'll now vote on approval of ICG minutes. Members in support of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye. It's unanimous, yeah, thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the election of officers for the technical committee to serve in FY 2025. I asked Claire Stewart, representing the nominating committee, to present the slate.
Sure. So last month, the slate of officers was presented by the nominating committee. The slate offered MDOT for chair and Baltimore County for vice chair. At this time, are there any additional names from the floor? Hearing none. So on behalf of the chair, I now ask for a member to move for approval of the slate of officers as presented, and then a second.
A motion. Sorry, who was the motion? Deb.
Those in favor of the slate, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed?
Welcome and abstention. Dan and Angie, you have a second one-year term that they'll be serving. All right, moving on to action items. The first action item today is resolution 25-1. It is a request to amend the TIP. So I'm going to ask Keith Kacharik to start us on that.
Sure, thanks. Good morning, everybody. As Regina mentioned, in resolution 25-1, MDOT MTA is requesting to amend 4 projects, 4 existing projects in the FY 24 to 27 TIP. Four projects include the agency-wide system preservation project, the Metro and Light Rail System Preservation and Improvements Project, Mark Facilities Project, and Mark Improvements Project. This amendment is also being presented to the ICG at this meeting, so fun, guys. All four projects were previously exempt, so we anticipate them staying exempt. And Mr. Albert Guiney Angle from MTA will present the amendments.
Hi, everyone. Apologize for being virtual today. But yeah, as Keith mentioned, there's four projects. Two of them fall in the category of these sort of 5307 projects, and two of them are MARC projects. So we'll start with 5307 projects. If you want to flip to the next slide. So we are preparing to obligate that FY20 5307 grant. So we're going to shift those funds to two projects in FY 2024. One of them is the agency-wide system preservation and improvement project, and the other is the Metro and Light Rail System Preservation and Improvement Project. So for agency-wide, that's about 11.6 million of federal money and 2.9 million of state money for a total of 14.5 million. And for the Metro and Light Rail System Preservation Improvement Project, it's about 34.8 million in 5307 money and 8.7 million of state money for a total of $43.5 million. Flip to the next slide. So for the agency-wide system preservation improvement project, so this is sort of our ongoing project to rehabilitate facilities, systems, infrastructure across the system. So specifically associated project with this allocation, roof replacements at Wabash, West Cold String Metro Substation, and Rogers and Ricestown Metro Stations and Northwest Bus Division. And it also continues to include funding for the agency-wide migration to MD First 700 MHz spectrum. So this will support our regional management operation initiatives to improve service, safety, and ensure preservation of infrastructure agency-wide. So I mentioned the apportionment earlier. And the schedule for the roof placements are anticipated to start in FY26, and the migration to 700 megahertz spectrum is ongoing. I think we're anticipated for completion in fiscal year 2026. Next slide, please. For the Metro and Light Rail System Preservation and Improvement Project, this is sort of our ongoing project to rehabilitate facilities specifically for light rail and metro. So for this specific project, light rail or metro projects include the street grade repairs, tunnel liner repairs, signaling rail car replacement, train control, tunnel door replacement repairs, and equipment upgrades at Wabash. Light rail projects include general rehabilitation, central business district cable replacement, and rehabilitation of the traction substations. Similar support regional management and operation initiatives to improve safety and service. And this really is an ongoing project with a lot of small sub projects within it. So really, there's no specific schedule that we could give for the funding that we're obligating here, other than we're looking to obligate it this year. If you go to the next slide. So the MARC projects, so these is a little bit of a different situation here. So there was an earlier amendment added funding to the MARC facilities project that should have been added instead to the MARC improvement projects. This is not new funding. We're moving forward with obligation to the FY 2021 5337 grant. And this funding covers CSX joint benefit projects and Amtrak agreements. Also inadvertently included in the previous amendments were two station improvements for Laurel and Muirkirk, which are in the TPB region. So this action would correct that. So to get into the details on the next slide. So we're looking to move 15 million of 5337 money and 3.7 million of state money from MARC facilities to MARC improvements. And then 427,000 of 5337 money, 106,000 of state money are going to be amended out of MARC facilities, and that's going to move into the TPV tip that relates to the Muirkirk and Laurel projects. And this action also adds 385,000 in federal money and 77,000 state money to address a budget amendment on a 2018 positive control project that historically was included on this tip page. Go to the next slide. So just overview of the Mark Facilities Project is our funding to identify, prioritize, and implement updates to new construction of Mark facilities. So this is decreasing that allocation, as I discussed, and schedule is sort of not applicable here because we're removing funding from the project to move it over to Mark improvements, which we'll go over on the next slide. So this Mark improvements is the funding for operating ongoing improvements that come from the Mark Master Plan, Amtrak CSX operating agreements. So those are examples include the Carroll interlocking, West Baltimore Lansdowne interlocking, and improvements to Jessup Yard. So these improvements in passenger rail corridor infrastructure are necessary to maintain and improve safety and quality of Mark infrastructure and service. And so this Mark improvements project will increase the state allocation by 15 million in 5337, 385,000 in 3028 funding, and 3.8 million in state match. And similarly to the system improvement project, this is an ongoing systemic project with a lot of sort of small sub projects in it, so we can't really give a schedule for it. That's an introduction overview of these actions. Happy to answer any questions that I can. And thanks for hearing.
Questions for Albert on these 4 projects from MTA? Anybody online? Are there any? Okay, at this point, we'll take a motion and a second, and then we'll ask from the public.
Berkman moves. Queen Anne's County will second.
Were there any comments or questions from the public on these amendments? Okay, at this time, and I'm going to do Tech Committee and ICG both at the same time. All those in favor of motion 25-1, please say aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you. Moving to the next action item, resolution 25-2. Let me pull this up. Again, I'd like to ask Keith Kuchar to introduce the resolution, please.
In resolution 25-2, Baltimore County is requesting to add 2 new projects to the FY 24 to 27 TIP. The Wise Avenue and Halliburton Avenue Bicycle Facilities Project and the Torrey C. Brown Trail Safety Improvement Project. This similar to the last projects, this amendment is also being reviewed by ICG at this meeting. They're both trail projects, so we are recommending both of those to be exempt. And Ms. Jessie Violet from Baltimore County will present the details.
Excuse me. Do you want to advance your slides?
Of course.
Okay, you just.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Jessie Bialik. I'm Baltimore County's bicycle and pedestrian planner. Thank you for having me. There's 2 projects that Keith had introduced that we would like to amend to put into our TIP. So the first, like Keith mentioned, was the Wise Avenue and Halliburton Avenue Bicycle Facilities Project. And the second one is the Torrey C. Brown Safety Improvements Project. Excuse me, I'm having a little hoarseness today. So the amendment for the Wise and Halliburton bicycle facilities utilizes the Highway Safety Improvement Program funds. The project includes $104,000 with $94,000 of federal dollars and $10,000 matching. This project will provide necessary safety improvements for pedestrians and bicyclists along Wise and Halliburton Avenue. We decided to ask for funds for this project from the HSIP grant because we had noticed that there have been a lot of crashes along this section of road with bicyclists and pedestrians. So we thought that for safety purposes, this would be a great project to work on. The next project is the Torrey C. Brown Safety Improvements Project. This project is also utilizing HSIP funds. The project in total cost will be $250,000. 225 is federal and 25,000 is matching. This project is putting raised crosswalks along each of the county-owned road intersections along the Torrey C. Brown Trail. There's 9 intersections in total. This is to increase driver awareness of the pedestrians and bicyclists along the Torrey C. Brown Trail. I don't know if anyone has heard, but we've had some unfortunate incidents recently in the past 5 years of people getting injured and worse along sections of the Torrey C. Brown. So we're really trying to get motorists to slow down and pay attention, because that's very, very important. That is all I have for everyone. Thank you for having me.
Just sort of hang on for a minute. So at this point, can I get a motion and a second from the floor, please? Motion? Yes.
Carroll County second.
At this time, are there any comments or questions from the members? Are there any comments or questions from the public?
I have a question.
Could you please identify yourself and then go ahead and ask?
My name is Alex Corman. I'm wondering, for these bikes, what kind of protection would they have? Would it be just the pop-up plastic bollards, or would there be like concrete protection for them?
I'm not sure about Wise Avenue, but for Torrey C. Brown, it's where the trail crosses a street. So they're simply raised.
They're raised crosswalks. They have like a speed hump almost on them.
Right,
Yes.
so they're just, the cyclists are just crossing the street there. I'm not sure about Wise Avenue or Holabird. Do you know what the treatment will be?
The treatment for Holabird will be bike lanes. If we can fit the protected ones, that's what we will do. Wise Avenue, we are still working out all the details for that section because it's very narrow and tight there.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Will all members who approve the resolution please say aye?
Aye.
Are there any members who oppose the resolution? Thank you. Okay, so we have completed 2 amendments to the 2024 TIP. And at this time, we're going to switch gears and approve the we're going to discuss approving the 2025 TIP. And as soon as I pull it up, Keith Kuchar is again. Didn't work right.
Guys are gonna get sick of me.
Never.
Never.
Say that until I leave the room. While Regina's pulling that up, might as well take this time to introduce Endemazia, who will be taking my place as the TIP coordinator here. So we'll be transitioning over the next year, and she'll be your primary contact as we do the next TIP. But for now, just keep me, and I'll give you her email address as we go through, but just wanted to introduce Endemazia real quick.
Okay.
Good morning again. So today I am going to be presenting to the technical committee, the transportation improvement program and associated, well, Anna will be doing the associated air quality conformity determination. So the 2025 to 2028 TIP contains 166 projects this year. That's and 11 of those are new. Those 166 projects add up to just over $6 billion. That includes 2.8 billion in federal funds, 2 billion in state fund or in toll revenues, and 1.3 billion in state and local funds. The projects in the TIP support long-range goals such as safety, prosperity, economic opportunity, and they're all laid out in our long-range plan. Funds programmed in the TIP cannot exceed what can reasonably be expected to be available from state, local, and federal sources. So this exhibit here kind of shows how funding has varied over the years. Funding in the 2025 to 2028, as you can see, is much higher than the previous years. And that is essentially because we've added the Key Bridge funding into this TIP, and we'll talk about that in a little bit later in the presentation. This is a breakdown of the funding with state, local funding shown in orange, and the dark blue is federal funding, and then the teal color is toll revenues. The Maryland Transportation Authority accounts for about $2 billion. That again, the vast majority of that is the Key Bridge. Maryland Department of Transportation, State Highway Administration, and MTA both account for about $1.4 billion. And I should note that the $1.4 billion of MTA money does not include operating costs, which are state funds only. And that number is just over $5 billion over the 4-year TIP cycle. So MTA puts in a lot of money that doesn't really appear in the TIP. Locally sponsored projects, which are all the counties, Baltimore City and Annapolis, account for about $710 million. There are 9 categories in the TIP that we can break down and show funds for each of these categories. Highway preservation accounts for over 53% of all the funding. And again, the big chunk of that money in the highway preservation funds is the Key Bridge. Transit preservation comes in and they have about 14% of the funds. Highway capacity is just under 10%. And that's kind of flip-flop from last year where highway capacity was higher. So as the years have gone by, highway capacity has actually dropped significantly. In 2021, that highway capacity funds were over 30%, and now we're down to under 10% in highway capacity funds. Ports projects come in at 7.6%, and most of that is the Howard Street Tunnel. We can talk about that a little bit later as well. And then there's smaller amounts of emission reduction strategies, commuter rail preservation, and so on that account for the remaining money. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but this kind of illustrates that bridges and bridge repairs is the bulk of the highway preservation funds. Roadway resurfacing is about 16%. And that's about half of what it was last year. And then there's smaller amounts of bridge inspection and road resurfacing and rehabilitation that make up the remaining of the highway preservation funds. We also break down the highway capacity funds. This shows that the I-95 express toll lanes from just around White Marsh Boulevard in Baltimore County to just a little bit north of Maryland 24 in Harford County. That accounts for 75% of the highway capacity funds. So 8% of the funds are for projects on the Baltimore Beltway that expands the inner and outer loops by using inside shoulders from I-70 to White Marsh Boulevard. So as you can see, just those 2 projects alone account for over 80% of the highway capacity funds. We also can break down the transit preservation funds, similar to the way we break down the highway capacity funds. Most of the money goes to a few specific areas. 22% goes towards bus and rail preventive maintenance. Another 22 goes for the Eastern Bus Facility. And almost 12% is for Metro and Light Rail System preservation. So these three projects alone take up about 50% of the transit preservation funds. MTA uses our public participation process that we use for the TIP to meet the Federal Transit Administration's public participation requirements. So in the TIP document, we break down the MTA funding by category, and the largest category by far is the 5307C, and those are capital requests in urbanized area funds that are used for things such as bus purchases, bus replacements, and preventive maintenance, and that accounts for about 524 million of the MTA total. The next largest category is section 5337, which is state of good repair. That includes preventive maintenance and mark improvements, and that is about $362 million. And finally, congestion mitigation and air quality, or CMAQ funds, make up the third largest category at about $241 million. And those are projects that are aimed at reducing emissions and improving air quality. The TIP summarizes the anticipated impact of TIP investments towards the achievement of performance measures and targets. This requirement was first reflected in the 2020 to 23 TIP as a result of MAP 21 legislation. And that legislation required MPOs to adopt and track 25 performance measures, including transit asset management, transit safety, highway safety, traffic congestion, and several others. And this legislation has been subsequently strengthened in the FAST Act and the IIJA. And this approach helps us to improve methods to connect TIP investments with their impact on performance measures. Just wanted to point out a couple of the projects this year that are of pretty significance. The Odenton Mark TOD in Anne Arundel County will replace the existing surface parking lot with a 1,000 car plus garage, and that's going to help to enable TOD development in the area. This is programmed at $53.8 million and is expected to be operational in 2026, and that's just the first phase of development of the TOD in that area. Russell Street Viaduct Bridge replacement in Baltimore City over CSX railroads in Ostend Street. This will be a new structure and will include ADA compliant sidewalks. It's programmed at $32 million with a total cost of $52 million. In Howard County, funding has been included for the Patapsco Regional Greenway, Elk Ridge to Guinness Open Gate Brewery project. This will complete a 1.5 mile segment of the overall 40-mile greenway and includes 10 to 12 foot lanes, hard surface trail with a boardwalk over some sensitive wetland areas. Howard County received a $1.25 million grant to assist in construction of that project, and Baltimore County is contributing $500,000 in engineering. The I-795 Dolefield interchange in Baltimore County will construct a $144 million interchange at Dolefield Boulevard and widen I-795 from Owens Mills Boulevard to Franklin Boulevard. This project will provide improved access to planned growth area along Red Run Boulevard and in Owens Mills. The Maryland Port Administration continues improvements to the Howard Street Tunnel, which will allow double stack trains from the Port of Baltimore and eliminate an existing bottleneck between Baltimore and Philadelphia. There's also 21 other structures that need to be adjusted to allow that double stacking, but the Howard Street Tunnel is the main one. MDOT-MTA has included funding for the Red Line, which will provide an east-west high-capacity, high-frequency line between downtown Baltimore and Woodlawn. This project is still in the alternatives development stage, but I think probably everybody saw the announcement by Governor more that he's looking for rail as part of that project. And now MDTA has also included funding for the Francis Scott Key Bridge. TIP funding is shown at $1.5 billion and is currently listed as toll revenues as they await federal funding to be authorized. Adding funding now allows MDTA to begin engineering and continue with cleanup and removal of the existing structure. And that project was amended into the 2024 TIP. In May, they added $100,000 for planning. And then in June, they amended it again to add $70 million for engineering, planning, and construction. And that all goes towards the same things for cleaning up the existing structure that was in the river. Finally, in Carroll and Harford counties, there are 17 bridge repair or bridge replacement projects. Those projects are intended to improve safety and extend the life cycle of those structures. Again, this year we've highlighted our interactive map. So if you wanted to look at specific projects that fall under a certain project type, or such as highways or bridges or bike pedestrian projects, you can tag any of the dots on these maps and it'll bring up the projects themselves. It's a very useful tool. Some of the projects or some of the changes that have been made since the May draft went out of the TIP. Again, I mentioned the Key Bridge and how that will be included as a major project in the 2025 TIP. It didn't appear in the May draft. Also, the Baltimore City Ferry Service Improvement Project, that was in the 2024 TIP. The May draft did not include that, but then Federal Transit Administration notified us that the money had not been obligated in 24 like we thought it was going to be. So we had to shift that project into 2025. So it wasn't in the May draft, but now that project does appear in the final version. One last major change was some clarification on how we calculated the highway safety improvement performance measures. In the May draft, we included the old methodology, which has now since been updated. So the new methodology is what will be shown in the final version. We've also made quite a few minor updates to appendices and some of the other chapters. Most of the chapter amendment or changes were a result of adding the Francis Scott Key Bridge project in. So there were some of the tables and charts that needed to be updated. Total cost of that was shown as 4.52 billion is now 6.1 billion. So those were the changes in the chapters, and then a lot of the appendices will be updated for the final. That includes the self-certification, the TIP amendment log, the public participation aspect, adding the resolution that we're presenting today, and we also added the earmark projects that were not available during the May. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Anna Marshall, who will give the air quality conformity presentation. You want to just stay there and I'll flip your slide.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Keith. So the air quality conformity determination document goes along with the TIP, and it ensures that the projects that are being added to the TIP do not worsen air quality in the region or delay the attainment of the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS. It requires that transportation emissions do not exceed the motor vehicle emission budgets that are set in the State Air Quality Implementation Plan, or the SIP. And that document is produced by MDE. And it also ties together transportation planning and air quality planning. So currently, the reason we have to do the conformity determination is because the Baltimore region is in non-attainment for the 2015 ozone NAAQS, which is 70 parts per billion. And the regional emissions analysis includes models of transportation emissions of different pollutants that contribute to ozone, including nitrogen oxides and VOCs or volatile organic compounds, and what is expected from on-road mobile vehicles. And the model shows emissions in particular horizon years, assuming existing road and transit networks in addition to the TIP and plan projects. And the model horizon years, which were 2023, 25, 35, 45, and 2050, show all emissions measuring below what was allowed in the state implementation plan. Some processes we go through with the ICG. So we develop a methodology letter in the beginning of the year, and this outlines which pollutants we're looking at, what model we're dealing with, the model run years, and we work with ICG and then send to the federal agencies for review. Next, we determine the conformity status of each project in the TIP and the plan, and we determine if it's either exempt from conformity or non-exempt or regionally significant. And the next step is BMC and MDE run the EPA developed emissions model called MOVES, and MDE supplies the official results. And then ICG approves these regional emission results following a meeting, and those results are then available for public review. And then we hold a public comment period for the TIP and air quality conformity determination. And that was open this year until June 17th. And staff is currently reviewing the comments and providing answers to the comments. And today we're looking to the ICG and technical committee to recommend approval of the conformity document.
Okay, so as the board always does, there is a 30-day public comment period for our key actions. The 2025 Transportation Improvement Program did go out, as well as the associated air quality conformity of the TIP and plan. At the end of that comment period, well, I'll just say, we did have 2 virtual meetings, one midday, one evening. The evening meeting was recorded and remains online, available to the public if anyone would need background. Through our public input platform, our coordinator, Monica Haynes-Benketta, our public involvement coordinator, was able to determine that there were over 2,170 visitors to public input website to look at this material, 209 participants in terms of answering survey questions or leaving comments. And then that leads us to, there were 253 comments on the TIP and air quality document. You can see the major themes were identified, and I will say public input uses AI, and they help go through all of the comments and the themes that was generated as a result. Not new to us, we've heard it from the public: reduce highway capacity expenditures, instead invest more in transit, also invest more in bicycle and pedestrian improvements, and there was a concern for safety. So those were the kind of 4 main areas. Those comments are available online to the public can see those. Those comments were sent to all members of both committees here. And I thank some of the members who have returned responses on some specific projects. Staff are working on some of the larger regional, and by next week, we will have that completed, and the technical committee, ICG, and the board will review those comments. They will be the board's response to comments in about another week, and they'll go out to the public 2 weeks before the board votes. There were several other questions on the survey, and of those 209 participants, 83% know about the board. I think that's pretty fantastic. That's much better. And 53% of the respondents had recently used transit. So just nice to know. I will say we don't break it out in these themes, but a number of the comments about reducing highway capacity did say anything you do with roadways are going to result in poor air quality. So there was sort of a backhand way to address air quality. And there was also a concern about electric vehicles generating more particulate matter, something to do with the tires. So we're looking into that. And I'm looking at our friends that know more about that, and we'll respond to that. So we are still working on this extensive list of comments. There are a lot of people that had very heartfelt comments, a couple of organizations. You all have that. So we will be completing the response. It's a draft response, and then the members will weigh in. Does this reflect the sentiment of the board? So at this point, we would like to ask for resolution 25-3, a motion to approve or move it to the board.
Carrie with MDOT, I'll move that motion.
Carrie, and who was up? Deborah, was that you? Okay. So
Baltimore City seconds.
okay, we have lots of okay. We have a motion and a second, and this does include, because this is a resolution of the TIP and air quality conformity, if members of both committees who are in favor would please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, and I apologize, I did not have anybody in the chat room that wanted to comment on this. All right, motion approves. Thank you very much. Or the resolution is approved. So the next two items, the next one is going to be self-certification. I can do that one. This item is called self-certification. It is done in conjunction with the approval of any TIP. So we do it annually. And although we are wrapping up the 4-year certification by our federal partners, we are still doing our annual certification. And basically certification has us looking at the process. Has the board and its committees followed the metropolitan regs in terms of an approved regional transportation planning process? I know you all kind of know this. There's in the resolution, there is a series of items that we are asked to address. There's 2 pages here, these 10 items. In the use of federal funds and the intent of the planning process, has the board met the requirements? So in the documentation, it was about a 20-page or so resolution. In the attachment, we address all 10 of those items of note, sort of updated this year. We talk about the Unified Planning Work Program, and then we also look at, which is more forward facing, and then more internal, we look at employment, contracting, and procurement. Some of the changes from last year, we updated and continued our references to the Transportation Core. That is the group that it meets virtually. Monica manages that with input from a variety of staff. We get feedback from this group on activities that the board is engaged in. We updated quite a bit on performance-based planning and programming. With the development of the long-range plan and the TIP last year, there was a robust system performance report. So we've referenced that. We talk about the adoption of the 2025 UPWP budget as well as the adoption of a DBE goal. Talk about development of the TIP and conformity that we just reviewed. And earlier this year, the board adopted a new Title VI program and an ADA self-assessment. So based on staff review of self-certification requirements, this resolution would say that the board has engaged in a robust public process and met the planning goals. So is there a motion and a second for this resolution on self-certification? Is there a second?
Queen Anne's County will second.
Queen Anne's, okay. Are there any comments or questions from the members? Does anyone from the public have comment or question? I do not see anything in the chat box. Okay, so at this point, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, the resolution will move forward to the BRTB. Okay, we have two more action items today. Staff are going to introduce both. First, the Transportation Alternatives Program applications, and then the Carbon Reduction Program applications. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to discuss recommendations because it got a little convoluted this year. So Charlene is going to start us with the TA.
Thank you. My name is Charlene Mingus. I'm the Active Transportation Planner at BMC. And I'm presenting an overview of the applications for the fiscal year 2025 Transportation Alternatives Program. So applications were due mid-May. MDOT, SHA, and BMC staff reviewed the applications and conducted site visits as needed. The funds available for the Baltimore region urbanized area include $4,438,487. 6 applications were received with requests totaling $33,911,652.40. Funds available for the Aberdeen, Bel Air South, Bel Air North urbanized area include $430,525. One application was received requesting $108,000. So this Anne Arundel County submitted an application to construct a half-mile shared use path along Blue Water Boulevard to connect two existing paths for a total cost of $973,500, excuse me. Constructing this segment would complete a major piece of the bike and pedestrian spine network, providing regional connections via the WB&A Trail into Prince George's County and ultimately Washington, D.C. Anne Arundel County also submitted a TA application for construction of a 2.44 mile shared use path that would connect South Shore Trail Phase 1 to Crownsville Park for a total cost of $6,794.40. This path would create access to many businesses and services in the area. Crownsville Park is also being redeveloped by the county, and that will provide additional connections in the area. Baltimore City submitted a TA application for construction of a 2.8 mile shared use path from Druid Lake Park to Lake Montebello for a total cost of $25,026,921.70. Construction of the path would increase the mileage of the Baltimore Greenway Trails network and increase the connectivity of existing trails in the area. Baltimore City also submitted an application for construction of a half-mile long shared use path to replace the existing Jones Falls Trail segment, which has safety and maintenance concerns. The total cost would be $13,488,000, 92. The project would be along Falls Road and Lamville Street from the CSX Bridge north of the North Avenue overpass to Charles Street. This path would create an accessible and continuous connection in the area around Penn Station, which is currently under redevelopment and will soon be a state designated transit-oriented development district. The town of Mount Airy submitted an application for design of a recreational trails project that would extend an existing Rails to Trails pathway eastward from Watkins Park across Maryland 27 to Center Street for a total cost of $825,000. This project would improve connectivity and accessibility for the local community and would also boost local tourism in the area. Baltimore City submitted an application for design of a safe routes to school project, including intersection improvements and enhancements, such as mid-block traffic calming, with the intention to improve the safety and multimodal travel to and from the school and the area recreational facilities. The total project cost would be $247,371. In the Aberdeen Bel Air urbanized area, the city of Havre de Grace submitted a safe routes to school project to complete a feasibility study to identify opportunities for 2 safe, accessible, and connected bike and pedestrian routes from subdivisions west of US 40 to Havre de Grace Elementary, middle and high schools for a total cost of $150,000. And those are all the projects that were submitted to the TA program. Thank you.
Now we are going to discuss carbon reduction projects that were submitted.
Okay, I'll be discussing the carbon reduction program applications today. So a little background, the IIJA established the carbon reduction program, and it's administered by the FHWA, provides $6.4 billion in formula funding over 5 years for states to develop carbon reduction strategies and for projects to reduce transportation carbon dioxide emissions, including traffic management, public transportation, pedestrian facilities, alternative fuels, and port electrification. And since this is a formula program, federal funding is apportioned among the states, and then states have broad discretion over how to spend the funds. So we received a total of 26 applications throughout the region. And so I'm not going to go through each one like Charlene did with the TA program because we would be here forever. But I'll go a little over the different groups that we discussed. So in the Baltimore region, there is $14,788,106 available between fiscal years 22 to 24. And the Aberdeen to Bel Air urban area, there is $1,307,736. And in the Westminster urban area, there's $299,895 available. And to help with reviewing these applications, we grouped them into technology advancement projects, bicycle pedestrian projects, and bus transit projects. We received 12 technology advancement ones, 7 bike, and 7 bus. So for technology advancement projects, some common themes we are seeing among the project types includes LED light conversions, EV charger installations and EV purchases, and solar installations. And this is just listing all the project names and where they're located. And there's more information in the resolution if you're interested in reading about the project and seeing more information, including the funding they're requesting. For the bicycle and pedestrian projects, we received 7 applications. And the project types include design or construction of multi-use trails and sidewalk and road improvements. And again, you can find more information in the resolution. And finally, the bus and transit projects types include fleet expansion, new service, and transit facilities. And again, there's more information in the resolution. And I think that is, yeah,
Thank
I'll
you.
pass it to Regina.
Okay, and we did it this way. At this point, we're going to make recommendations, and the reason we waited is there are some similarities between the 2 programs and between the MDOT review team. Darren, you're here, Darren Lavas from MDOT. In consultation, we had some bike ped projects that asked for both design and construction in the same year. That isn't allowed to happen. You need to have design complete before construction can be awarded. So we moved a couple projects from the carbon reduction program application side to the TA program side. And that's why we're kind of doing this, because we've mixed some projects. Moving forward, both are competitive projects or funding types of programs. They will both have their own cycle. We may review them and do a similar kind of have to move thing. But for this year, since we made some moves, we decided to go this way. Because there is funding from FY22 and 2023, the Westminster area is still a small urban area. It is after that they're no longer considered a small urban area. So you'll see going forward that only the Bel Air Aberdeen area is a small urban area. And the last point, in our FY 2025 work program, you all approved a task that will look at identifying and prioritizing carbon reduction projects and protect related projects, more resiliency oriented. And I think that will help all of the members. What the consultant will do is help us identify the best and strongest projects to compete for these funds. And similar to prior years, any project that is eligible but is not recommended for funding here in the region is eligible to compete out of the statewide funds. So a little bit of sunshine in there. So let me get to the recommendations. Since this was a bit of a convoluted process, I'm doing the small urban areas first, made it a little bit easier. Under the Transportation Alternatives Program, staff are recommending that in the Bel Air Aberdeen area, that the connecting communities to schools be awarded $108,000. Under carbon reduction, there's a recommendation for both small areas, the street light LED conversions in Hartford County and the level 3 chargers and EVs in Carroll County. Okay, and that is within the available funding for those urban areas. So under the original applications to the TA program, we're recommending Blue Water Boulevard, rails to trails on Maryland 27, and the safe routes to school, Cecil Elementary. Moving from carbon reduction to TA because of the suitability. And I will say some of these projects that asked for both design and construction are only getting design. So in this category, we're recommending Bloomsbury Crossing, Jones Falls Gateway, and the Baltimore Greenways Trail Network, the Druid Hill to Lake Montebello project. Okay, so that is the TA recommendations that we are making to you. Under the carbon reduction, did I not include? Oh, I just spelled it out. All of the projects on this list we're recommending award of the full funding amount, with the exception of the MTA's fuel cell electric bus. It was over $6 million, and we had hit the threshold in consultation with MDOT. That was reduced to the 5.3 million award. And I'll also say, we've discussed this with the board, but full disclosure, probably late last year, Anne Arundel County had submitted a request for funding for Maryland 2 and Maryland 450. Legitimate projects, somehow inadvertently, someone at SHA Finance gave them CRP funds. This is a competitive grant program, and so what we did was, even though they were sort of awarded by mistake, we brought those two projects back through this competitive program. And we had discussed this with the board. The board did not want to de-obligate those funds that had been obligated to Anne Arundel County for these two projects. So Maryland 2 and Maryland 450 will continue to move forward at the amount that they were originally awarded. Today, we weren't going to spend a lot of time, although Darren, if you wanted to make any comments, there were some projects that were not eligible. There were some that maybe weren't as strong as others. So if you notice, when Anna presented 3 full pages of projects, not everything was funded. And some of those will not be able to move forward to the statewide competition, but this is staff's recommendation jointly with MDOT. And what I'm going to do, I'll answer any questions if you have them, and then I'll need a motion and a second on both resolutions. So I hope we didn't confuse you by doing it this way. But since we were moving projects from one category to the other, we thought this was just clean. Are there any questions? Sir.
Yeah, so I'm Darren Lovas with MDOT, and we would be delighted to have briefings about the projects that did not move forward. And as you can see from the resolution, there's 4 specific criteria that helped us to screen for those. And the good news is this is a relatively new program under federal law and relatively new to MDOT as well as other state DOTs. And we're intent on creating a project pipeline long-term, right? So any projects that couldn't move forward now, we're looking to future rounds of funding and hoping to develop them such that they can move forward in future rounds. So happy to have briefings about what transpired this round and to prep for future rounds.
I guess in general, could you give an overview of the 4 criteria you mentioned?
Yeah, so they're mentioned in the resolution. So it's readiness for obligation, greenhouse gas reduction potential, whether or not a project is cited in an environmental justice area, and then whether or not it reflects a local and or state priority, and local includes regional. So those were the 4 criteria that we used.
Okay. So depending on the votes here, when the resolutions move to the board later this month, we will populate the attachment to the resolution. You should notice when you got yours, the recommendation wasn't filled out. We worked till late last week with the MDOT team. And a big shout out to Sandy Hertz and Sean Kiernan. You had a big team involved, but they worked quite a bit with us as we came to these recommendations. Anybody online? I do not see any hands up. There's nothing in the chat. No. All right, so if I can, resolution 25-5 is for the transportation alternatives recommendations. Is there a motion and a second for that?
Motion for Baltimore County.
Second, Carrie with MDOT.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. I'll invite both committees. Those in favor of the resolution, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed to the resolution? No. Thank you. So now regarding resolution 25-6 on the recommendations for the carbon reduction program. Can I ask for a motion and a second, please?
Howard County motions.
Motion, a second?
Carrie with MDOT, I'll second.
Thank you. All those in favor of the recommendations for carbon reduction, please say aye.
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 Is anyone opposed to the resolution? Thank you very much. We have completed the 6 resolutions for today. We have 3 more presentations. This should not take too long. We're within the time. At this point, sort of a 2-pronged. Anna's going to go first on CMAQ mid-performance, and then Sophia Cortazza from MDOT. So let me put this down. There it is. Thank you, Anna.
Hey, again, everybody, I'm back. So this presentation, doing jointly with Sophia, and we're gonna just kind of do a briefing of the CMAQ target setting program in the second performance period. So I'm gonna go over the congestion targets, and Sophia will talk about the emission reduction measure, but a little background on the CMAQ program. So the MAP 21 and the FAST Act require performance measures for state DOTs and MPOs to assess traffic congestion and on-road mobile source emissions for the purpose of carrying out the congestion mitigation and air quality improvement or CMAQ program. There is the PHED measure, which is the peak hour excessive delay per capita, annual hours of peak hour excessive delay. And then there is the non-SOV travel measure, which stands for the percent of non-single occupancy vehicle travel. And then the emission reduction measure, we look at the 2- and 4-year total emission reductions for each applicable criteria pollutant and precursor. This chart, you can find it on the FHWA website. It's just an overview of the different performance periods and where we are in the process. So we're currently in the second performance period for both on-road mobile source emissions and traffic congestion measures, which is it's a 4-year period from fiscal year 2022 to 2025. And the first performance period, full performance plan was presented to the BRTB in 2022 and approved by resolution. And now we are at the mid-performance period of the second performance period. So, and that report is due to MDOT, or MDOT submits it on October 1st, 2024 to the FHWA. So the first measure is the peak hour excessive delay annual hours. And the following are the targets that were approved in resolution 23-5. And these targets are for the reporting period from 2022 to 2025. So Our 2-year target for the Baltimore region was to be under 14.8 annual hours. And the 4-year target was 15.7 annual hours. And we also look at the Aberdeen urban area, and it was for both targets, it was 6.9 annual hours. And these numbers are determined in coordination with MDOT. So in looking at setting targets should be reasonable and based on analysis of trends and projections of future efforts. And trends are looked at using the RIDIS software, and targets are coordinated with MDOT. A little more information is that the peak hour excessive delay measure looks at per capita on the national highway system. And excessive delay is based on travel time at 20 miles per hour or 60% of the posted speed limit travel time, whichever is greater in 15-minute intervals per vehicle. And after the first performance period, the per capita measure applies to population criteria with more than 200,000 people. So that's why we also look at the Aberdeen area. So this chart here is kind of showing the trends that we got with the RIDIS software. So of performance. So in the Baltimore area, 2019 saw 20.6 annual hours, and then 2021, we negated 2020 because of the COVID pandemic. 2021 is 13.9 hours, so there is a significant drop. And 2022 is 12.6 hours, and 2023 was 14.8 hours. And we've been noticing an increase again since the pandemic. And so the 2-year target was 14.8. So the Baltimore area hit the target directly, and the 4-year target is 16. We're going to increase it to 16.9. And that is just because of the trends we've been seeing, and these are coordinated with MDOT. And we're also going to be increasing the 4-year target to 8.3 for the Aberdeen area, because they did not meet their target for 2023. For the non-SOV travel, the approved targets were 25.3% for the 2-year target and 25.5% for the 4-year target for Baltimore. And for Aberdeen, they were both 16.8%. And this measure includes all surface modes of transportation that are not SOV, so single occupancy vehicle, and they also may include travel avoided by teleworking. And so for this performance measure, it's actually good if the number is above the target, because we want to see if as a region we're increasing the non-single occupancy vehicle travel. And so we've been seeing an increasing trend, and it's probably because of increasing teleworking because of the pandemic. And so we hit 30.7% for the Baltimore region in 2022. And so we decided to keep the targets the same. So there's no changes to these targets. And that's all I have on the congestion targets. And so I'll turn it over to Sophia now, and then he can both answer questions.
Just check real quick, there's a question in the chat box. Oh, okay, Kari's jumping off. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so as Anna mentioned, I'm gonna be talking about the emissions reductions targets. So my name is Sophia Cortazzo, I'm with MDOT. And I just also wanted to let you know I have Rebecca Bankard joining virtually. She's a consultant with MDOT. In case any questions come up, she might help us answer those. So let's see. Perfect. Okay, so as Anna mentioned, we're right now in the mid period of a 4-year period. So we're gonna be looking at both the 2-year targets as well as the 4-year targets. So first I'm gonna start by talking about statewide, and then I will get into the Baltimore region specifically. So for the 2-year targets, and I will also orient you based on this graph. So we wanna be, for this measure, we wanna be at or above the targets is a good thing, because what the target is showing is the quantifying of the reduction of these pollutants. So the more that we reduced pollution based on these projects, the better. Okay, so for the statewide targets, we met both of the targets for the 2-year period in both VOCs and NOx, as you can see by the red bars on this graph. So the dark gray on the left was the 2-year target, and you can see both of those red bars are above those targets. So those were both met during this 2-year period, and we are on track to meet or exceed the 4-year targets at the statewide level. So that's a good thing. And then these are also talking about statewide. So this shows here the types of projects that were funded during this 2-year period. So what's important to see from these graphs is that although more number of projects are in the bicycle and pedestrian category, most of the reduction in the pollutants is coming from the congestion reduction and traffic flow improvements types of projects, just because simply those projects have a lot more reduction in pollution for those types of projects. Okay, so next I'm going to be talking about the Baltimore region specifically. So the good news is that in the region, both the VOC and NOx 2-year targets were met, and we're on pace to meet or exceed those 4-year targets as well. So this slide also shows the 2 projects that were funded during this 2-year period, and the I-695 Baltimore Beltway Tismo project is where those emissions benefits are coming from. And there was also one project that we only took qualitative benefits for. So that's why it's not showing up a specific measure for VOC and NOx for that project. Okay, I'm not gonna go through every single line on this slide, but this slide can show all the different projects that are going on. So the two new projects that we just looked at for this period, as well as all the ongoing projects. Basically the way that we measure these reductions is that you quantify the benefits of a project in the year that it starts. So the continuing projects, although they're ongoing, they don't affect the measurements from this specific 2-year period. However, they are still projects that are ongoing, and we are receiving the emissions reduction benefits from those projects. The important part on this slide is that second graph on the bottom, which says the 4 anticipated projects for fiscal year 24 and 25. So that top part is just talking about federal fiscal 22 and 23, which was the first part of this performance period, but the federal fiscal 24 and 25 are talking about those second 2 years of the 4-year period. And so those anticipated projects are things that might go on during the second 2 years of this period, and implementation of those projects is what would help us continue to reach those 4-year targets, because we can receive benefits as those projects get funded. Okay. So, cut it off there. Okay, there we go. So this slide here on the left in green, that's showing, like I just talked about, the light green are the continuing projects versus those dark green are those 2 new projects from this 2-year period. And then on the right, you can see the projects separated out by project type. So a lot of the projects, that orange, oops, it looks like it's actually cut off a little bit here. Okay, there you go. The orange is showing transit projects, and that's because in the Baltimore region, a lot of money is going to transit, mostly the bus improvements in the region. And then you can see in gray is the congestion reduction and traffic flow improvement projects. And then there's also a small amount from ride sharing and bicycle pedestrian projects, as well as one tiny sliver of a small amount of money that was deobligated during this period. And I'm just gonna go over a few items again on a statewide level. So this is looking at the two different federal fiscal years side by side. We have federal fiscal year 22 on the left and 23 on the right. So first we're looking at the funding during these 2 years. So during federal fiscal 22, there was $54.3 million and 12 projects. And then during federal fiscal 23, $49.8 million and 11 projects. And then again, here you can see the split where, and again, this is on a statewide basis. But again, you can see the split here between a majority of transit improvement projects in orange, as well as a significant amount for the other three categories: bicycle and pedestrian, ride sharing, and congestion reduction and traffic flow improvements. Okay, here on this slide, we are looking at the funding by mode. So in the yellow, we have the majority of money going to MTA, Maryland Transit Administration, and then that light blue segment is State Highway Administration. And so again, on the left is federal fiscal 22, and on the right is federal fiscal 23. All right, one more slide here is showing the CMAQ funding split out by the different MPOs. So you might not be that surprised to see that the Baltimore region is making up the largest segment of that chart. And then you can see that orange, that kind of orangey color is the Metropolitan Washington COG. The light green is Cecil County, and then a small amount in gray for no MPO or statewide projects. So I'm just going to land us back on this last slide about the Baltimore region in case anybody had any specific questions for me. Or also, I guess if anybody had questions on the previous part about PHEAD and non-SOV for Anna.
This is all background information this month. Next month, Anna will come back with a resolution. So we want to make sure folks have a sense of what we're talking about before the action item. Any questions from our members online?
Question on the slide right before this for the MPO funding.
Sure.
Is that the portion of the MPO in Maryland or total funding to those MPOs? Some of those MPOs cross state lines.
This is the portion in Maryland.
In Maryland, so they're Maryland. Okay, thank you.
Yep, no problem.
So actually related to that, I did have a question. The one project that was not in an MPO area, is that project in a non-attainment area of the state?
Rebecca, can you hear the question? Let me know if you need me to repeat it.
Yeah, I hear the question. So in those situations, generally what happened is the project is happening in multiple jurisdictions across the state, and we can't necessarily either we haven't been able to like break it down and quantify benefits for just one specific area. So like it may be happening in Baltimore, and there may also be benefits happening in the Washington region. There may be benefits happening in Cecil, and just because of the way that we're getting the data, we're not able to break it down and give those benefits to each specific MPO. So therefore, we just take an overall statewide emission benefit and do not assign it to any of the MPO regions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca.
I have a question. Next slide, one slide back.
Oh, back.
One more. One more. You had a chart where the MPOs, there was a table that showed the different projects.
Yes.
So there's one, there's a negative on one of the funding.
Yeah, so that is a,
What that is.
sure, so that money was de-obligated during this period, so. I think I wrote myself a note here, so that was a project that was closed out, so the funding was de-obligated and that money will go back. Into the pot of CMAQ money that could potentially be used for another project. Does that make sense?
Makes sense that it was done, but I'm not sure. Who would we talk to about why it was done, so.
Okay, Rebecca, do you have any more details on reasoning of this de-obligation?
The only thing I know is, so that would have been de-obligated by SHA. My guess is they originally intended to use that money, and for whatever reason, the project was closed out and the money wasn't used. We could look into that and see if there's a reason specifically. I just know that the project is closed out.
Yeah, that'd be great information, if you could get that for us.
Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you very much. Charlene, would you mind walking over to Dan? I texted him, but he's up next. Thanks, Dan Pontius. Get you guys out of here a few minutes early.
I'll be staying.
And I'm probably gonna say something and then Dan will repeat it, but oops. Wrong way. For the last several months, Zach Kaufman has been talking in closed session about the scenario planning RFP, which is now out on the street. Part of that work, when we talk about scenarios, there are any range of areas that we can look at, but some may be geographic. You know, how does this future compare here to here? So part of that is we want to look at in scenario planning, how do environmental justice communities benefit under various scenarios compared to the region at large? And so we wanted to talk a little bit about identifying those areas. And Dan Pontius is the BMC's housing coordinator. And you know, the federal regs direct MPOs to bring housing and affordable housing more in line, connections with transportation planning. So Dan and the housing agencies in the region have been doing some work. They have an approach, and this is what we want to talk to you about today to use for scenario planning. It is not intended to be scoring for the long range plan. We may find it works well for scenario planning, and we might bring that to you for consideration, but that is not today. So Dan's gonna walk in any second. It's only a few minutes and then you'll be free. So last item on the agenda.
Regina, in the RFP, how many different types of scenarios are they approaching? I mean, how when we structured, or the RFP that's out there that they're responding to, will they be working with us to create a scenario? And
Yes.
how many scenarios would we be doing?
It's limited, I believe we
Focusing
said
on this.
5 to 7 in the RFP. And we indicated a range of possibilities, but we want them to bring their expertise and say, well, we like these, but did you think of this? And then the steering committee, which is really a combination of tech and board, will say, these are the ones we want to focus on. So we didn't nail it down, but we opened the door.
Okay.
Gave some
Trying to-
ideas.
Part of the scenarios will be trying to tie housing and their access to transportation.
That'll be one piece. This isn't, the scenario planning isn't housing only, but in terms of when we want to, well, he'll explain and then I'll come back.
Okay. Okay, great, thank you.
I did a sentence or two to dance while you were coming,
Okay.
but you go with it.
All right, great, thanks. I'm the housing policy coordinator here at BMC, and I'm keenly aware I'm like last presentation, so I'm gonna be as efficient and compelling as I can be. All right, so, let's see, is this there we go, okay. So this is the latest effort in kind of a new emphasis from US DOT and the Biden administration in coordinating housing and transportation. So we are wrapping up a project on the left there, exploring public attitudes on housing and transportation. We did 4 weeks of online research with 90 some people from around the region, a few focus groups. We're gonna get the draft report from that this week. And then you should see it later in July or August or something like that. But that we were asking people, we're trying to get a sense of what do people, citizens, think of housing and transportation and how to coordinate the two. And then what I'm talking about today relates to an RFP that's out right now about scenario planning, looking at various options that include, coordinating housing and transportation more closely. And when it comes to my position here at BMC, I work with the local governments on carrying out their duty to affirmatively further fair housing. But this is also kind of an underpinning of environmental justice, which is related to what I'm talking about today. This is a map from the Roosevelt administration in the depths of the Great Depression. They were trying to prevent a new foreclosure crisis, but this was the height of Jim Crow. So when they were looking at how to maintain the value of homes over the course of a new 30-year mortgage, what they said is, what the best way to do that is to ensure that we're only lending to white homeowners in white restricted communities. And that's what the green areas on the map are and the gray areas. And then what they said about areas that had significant numbers of African Americans or low-income immigrants, like the red and the yellow areas, was that you shouldn't lend probably at all there for home ownership or only at highest interest rates if you do that. And so that really set up the next 25 years, the creation of the suburbs. And really those redlined areas, what they got was public housing, redevelopment, urban renewal, public housing, and the highway to nowhere. If you look at the west side of that redlined area there, that's where the highway to nowhere is. So, so in a lot of ways, and in HUD actually in 2005, was found liable itself for violating the Fair Housing Act by concentrating public housing and affordable housing in those most disinvested areas. So my job is really to try to kind of undo the effect of that policy. And the idea of environmental justice also in the transportation realm involves that kind of thing. And so you can see this has actually played out in the real world. Harvard economist Raj Chetty actually got a hold of 20 million records for 20 million people born between 1978 and 1983. So about 40 years after that map was created. And then he was able to get their incomes at age 35, so between 2013 and 2018, and map their incomes at age 35 back on where they grew up. And this is specifically low-income kids who grew up in low-income families. And you can see that where they grew up had a huge impact on their income. The darker blue is obviously higher incomes at 35, and the darker rust color is lower incomes at 35. And so as part of actually starting in that lawsuit where HUD was found liable for violating the Fair Housing Act, that started this idea of opportunity mapping, where we kind of know what are the elements that go into helping someone get off to a good start in life. And so these are the indicators that we are using now for our regional fair housing analysis that we're coordinating right now with your jurisdictions, many of your jurisdictions, at least the larger ones. There are some indicators around educational opportunity. Are kids growing up getting a good education to set them up for success in life? Community strength, is there a lot of vacancy in your neighborhood? Are there successful employed folks as kind of role models or people to aspire to in general, overall? And then do you kind of have economic opportunity? You have access to jobs, good paying jobs as well. And when you put all those together and weight them equally, this is the map that comes up. And the darker purple areas are the areas of highest opportunity. The lightest purple is sort of the median quintile, and then the green areas are lowest opportunity, with the darkest green being the very lowest opportunity. And so that's this new map that we're talking about today. I went back and looked at the environmental justice areas map from the last long range plan, the current long range plan. And here, what we did was what you folks did was take the transportation analysis zones that were above the regional average for non-white population, or above average for number population above below 200% of poverty. And what that does is it ultimately covers more than half of the region. It's 54% of transportation analysis zones, 56% of the population. And so what we're proposing for this scenario planning exercise, where one of the key goals is to really see how much difference could we make. You know, let's look at different scenarios. How much difference could we make for equity or environmental justice? That's one of the ideas that we could look at. And so if we use this new map, if we use the bottom 2 quintiles, that would be a more focused part of the region. It would be 40% of census tracts, obviously the bottom 2 quintiles. It would actually be only 36% of the population. I mean, these are parts of the region that have been kind of depopulated over the years. And it would be an interesting way to try to coordinate our, some transportation scenarios with the work that I'm doing with your jurisdictions on fair housing. And also, as we look at my work in fair housing involves helping people who've been excluded from the higher opportunity parts of the region have access to them, and also bringing opportunity to the areas that have historically not had a whole lot of economic opportunity. And one of the key things there, I mean, as I mentioned, in 1937, those were the areas that got public housing. One of the key elements of my job is those still are generally the areas that get affordable housing. What those areas need is better infrastructure, including transportation. So that's a good tie-in for us to look at during the scenario planning as well. And
One second here as you go to your other data. When the housing folks did their work, Queen Anne's County was not, and you weren't part of the housing. If you all approve of this approach for the scenario planning, we will include at least the urban area of the county. So Dan's going to go into some really interesting data. We will have to add Queen Anne's for you. Okay.
All right, and so then to kind of look at some of the metrics that were used for environmental justice, we looked at median household. So this sort of shows that really, if you look at median household for these different quintiles, it really does make a difference. The highest opportunity one being more than 3 times the median income of the lowest opportunity quintile. And then looking again at the specific metric of percent below 200% of poverty, the threshold for the EJ areas in the long range plan was 21.4%. So that does sort of cut along the bottom 2 quintiles, the ones we're proposing to use in the scenario planning, are above that threshold of 21.4%, with nearly half of the residents of the lowest opportunity quintile being below 200% of poverty. And then looking at the racial makeup of these different quintiles, it does show, that's the other obviously metric behind the environmental justice areas. It does show that non-Hispanic white people make up nearly 3/4 of the highest opportunity quintile, as opposed to less than 1/5 of the lowest, with African-American population making up nearly 3/4 of the lowest quintile and only 7% of the highest quintile. But this analysis does show that just sort of treating non-white people as just sort of one monolithic population doesn't quite play out that way. The Asian American population in the region is similarly to the non-Hispanic white population, sort of concentrated towards the higher opportunity areas. So this does show there is a clear, and this, if you think back to that 1937 map, this does kind of follow this does show sort of lingering effects of that type of racial discrimination, frankly. And so again, it does sort of show that this is like an environmental justice type metric to be used. And I think, and that's the last. I can go back to the actual map, and if there are any questions, I'm happy to.
Hey, so what we're asking the technical committee is, would you feel comfortable if we used the lowest 2 quintiles from this opportunity mapping as the area in terms of scenario planning, the disadvantaged area, we would like to use those 2 lowest quintiles. We think it sharpens the pencil a little bit compared to all of the, like half the region is a TAZ. It doesn't quite help us, but we think this might be a good approach. I mean, there's a lot more to scenario planning than this, but this is an aspect that we want to consider. And so before we bring a consultant on board, this was something that was important to us and we wanted to present it to the committee. Anybody online or in the room, do you have questions?
What are the defines low or very low? I mean, just to know what each of these categories, where the break lines are, how do we understand that?
Well, let me go back to the indicators. You know, these indicators are kind of geared either towards opportunity or sort of the inverse of opportunity. So the more share of college educated people in the census tract, the higher opportunity it is. The higher share proficient in English, higher share proficient in math.
So all these categories factor into
they're sort of
high, medium, or low.
Exactly.
Those final determinations.
And so you take these figures and then make them into Z-scores. It sort of makes them comparable, you know, because they're all in different units. So by converting them to Z-scores, it makes them all comparable. And some of them are inversely. So vacancy rate, the higher the vacancy rate, the lower the opportunity. So that's generally how. So you put all those metrics together, and then you just kind of rank all the census tracts and divide them into quintiles. I mean, it is a little arbitrary, but we have found, I mean, I started here in 2012, but we had an opportunity collaborative. So we've been using this idea for about 12 years now, and we use this type of a map for our regional project-based voucher program, and then we look more carefully at the developments that are requesting those in terms of the schools and things like that. And it really does, I mean, it does actually, in our experience on the housing side, it really does effectively distinguish the parts of the region where, on average, you know, obviously there are exceptions on both sides, but on average, you got a really good shot of success in life if you're in that higher opportunity part of the region, and you're kind of behind the 8 ball if you're in the lower. You know, people can succeed, but it's just harder if you're in the lower opportunity quintiles.
Sure. And then is this all based on census tracts?
It is, yeah.
Okay. So in urban areas, your census tracts are going to be much smaller, much more concentrated, and your results are going to be much more targeted. In the rural areas, you're going to be dealing with much larger geographies,
right?
Which you could have multiple different situations going on within that same census tract. So as a rural jurisdiction, that's what we've run into. For example,
the pockets may be smaller, and it may be harder to show up on.
Yeah, as an example, you know, Kent County on the Eastern Shore is made up of 4 census tracts. So an entire county is divided only into 4 areas. So you have a lot of different things going on in some of those bigger geographies. So just something to be aware of in the more rural areas.
No, that's right.
Compared to an urban setting where you have very small, you know, neighborhoods could be just a couple blocks.
Yep.
And your results will be very focused.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right.
Do you have a question, David? No, thank you.
So the study is going to focus on those emphasis areas. I mean, we'll look at. Like
we're going to look at a range of scenarios across the whole region. Does this reduce traffic? Does it improve air quality and all that? But we'll also be able to look at the region versus the 2 lowest quintiles. And do some of those scenarios help those lower quintiles more? Do they adversely impact them more? So it just allows us to look at scenario planning in the region, but then in a more targeted way as well. So we're going to do both. So it would, you know, we'd like to use this. We
Is this like an equity tool?
Pardon?
Is this like an equity tool?
Yes.
That's the idea, is to use it as an equity tool and to, yeah, as Regina is saying, there's all, if you look at the RFP, there are all kinds of ideas for scenarios, greenhouse gas emissions, all kinds of things. But one of the things we want to look at is what is the effect on these particularly, historically disadvantaged parts of the metropolitan area.
And in part, kind of going back, and Zach would have done this, I really appreciate Dan doing it. Zach's on parental leave, he has baby boy at home. But Dan's been on the team at BMC that worked on developing the RFP, so he's very familiar with the work. So the scenarios, there could be all kinds of scenarios. Some of it will use our traditional travel demand model, but we're also going to use a federal tool called Vision Eval, and it's not as complex as the travel model, which can take several days to get through one iteration. This tool, it could do a whole bunch, it just goes through them. So we're going to use a combination of tools, and we're going to want to know what kinds of future will impact the region, but what do those futures do on these communities? We really want to be able to shed some light on that.
Do these areas align at all with like the federal Justice 40 areas?
There's a lot of similarity, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
It would be nice to see like kind of like an overlay to see how they line up short.
I mean, there's the federal, there's the Maryland tool, we have RTAZ. Do you want to see it? I mean,
that would be nice. I just want to see comparatively like
sure,
how the boundaries match up.
Absolutely.
I tend to, I mean, when we first did this opportunity, like through the Opportunity Collaborative map or process, we did something with the University of Maryland. We were really ambitious. We had like 92 indicators, weighted different things. And my experience since then is that these patterns are so strong that actually, they'll come through in just about any. So I bet there is, but it would be interesting to see the actual overlap between Justice 40. Those tracks might even be a little more, might be even a subset of these actually, I think, because I have taken a look at those.
Would you all like to wait and see that before we proceed with this approach? Or are you okay with the approach, but just want more info?
Yeah, I'm okay with the approach, just
okay. Are other members okay? Any objections? All right, Dan, thank you very much. Walked us through it.
Great, thank you.
That is our meeting today, and I failed to introduce, Todd is out of state online, but today I didn't introduce him. If y'all have not met, the man that's sitting here is our executive director, Mike Kelly. He was in to provide support in case I got overrun and couldn't manage it. So I very much appreciate all of you online and in the room. We'll work with Rebecca to put all of these PowerPoints online. And since it's a joint meeting, it's going to go on both committees. We may not finish it today. We might be able to finish it tomorrow, but all of those presentations, and we'll update the two resolutions for TA and CRP to have the recommendations when they go to the board. All right. Anything else before we close the meeting? Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful Independence Day holiday.
Thank you. BRTB is not meeting until August. Is BRTB meeting in August? They're not meeting in July.
Every month. They're meeting in July. They're doing all of this in July in person.